Vandeham.
The first time I saw Prabhupada was again on television, believe it or not. It was probably 1966, the summer of 66. And there was a show called Alan Burke. And what it was, he was an interviewer, and he used to interview his subjects. They had different interesting things that they did. He would interview them for about 15 minutes, and then he'd start so that they could lay out their trip, and then he would start insulting them. You're a stupid this and that, you know. And he used to smoke and wear a goatee, and thin guy, seemed like a frustrated old poet or something who never made it. But anyway, that was his regular program. I watched it because it was kind of interesting. This was before so this was first. So one week there was a woman on who was a yogini, and she had actually, and I didn't know it, Prabhupada's disciples were chanting the Maha Mantra, and she was talking about yoga. Then somehow or other he must have found out about Prabhupada. Then the next week Prabhupada was on. He was asking Prabhupada questions, and the same devotees were there again, you see. So Prabhupada's, they talked a lot. Alan Burke was talking about cosmic consciousness, and Prabhupada was talking about yoga. I had no idea this was about God, that this had anything to do with religion or the laws of God or anything like that. Most of what Prabhupada said I could not understand. I was spaced out, hippie, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to go into that. And his accent was even a little thicker then. I think he might have become clearer, or somehow I was able to understand it better later on. But so I could hardly understand anything he said, but there were two things. At one point, like I said, did I say this? Alan Burke, I noticed, the first thing I noticed was that Alan Burke did not light into Prabhupada and started insulting him like the usual guests. That was one thing I noted. But he did have this criticism. He said, well, if this movement is spiritual, but I see that you came here in a car, so how's that spiritual, right? So Prabhupada says, if a car is used in Krishna consciousness, then it is a spiritual car. I said, wow, a spiritual car. Wow, that's incredible. And me and my mother are sitting there watching. We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea, you know. And actually, I didn't come to the movement until more than a year after this. Then the other thing that he said that struck me, everything else I did not understand. At one point, he said the mantra. He said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I said, wow, that's far out. Yeah, that's, you know, hippies at the time. This is 1966, the summer of 66.
The first time I met Srila Prabhupada was in 1970 in the airport. We came for Rath Yatra. I was in San Francisco Temple. Srila Prabhupada came from Los Angeles. And when he came down from the plane, he came into our view when he came through the doors. At least a good 100 people were there to greet him. I was Bhakta Greg, just in the crowd. And I saw him, everyone bowed, and it was like seeing the sun come out. Such a thing you never saw. And then he came walking in Vishnujan. Prabhu was there, and he was playing the drum and singing. So he bowed like that, and Prabhu would pat him on the back as he walked by. And then he came into the crowd. People were moving because he wasn't going in the direction where he was being led. He walked off into the crowd, and then he came directly to me. Yes. And then he put his arms around me, and he hugged me. I never met him. But when we looked at each other, we knew each other. This wasn't the first meeting, you know. And everyone was asking me, do you know him, do you know him? And I said, no, I don't remember. I'm a new devotee. Only 3 months, 4 months in the temple. But that was the first time.
I thought I would tell my first encounter with Srila Prabhupada also. It seems that even though I had a lot of opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada being here in Los Angeles, I had the opportunity to record him many times, it always seems like a blur, but the first time that I met Srila Prabhupada is still very, very clear in my mind. I had actually, my first encounter with Srila Prabhupada was the Happening LP album, appropriately so for me. And I'd actually started chanting Hare Krishna listening to Srila Prabhupada's record that he had made in New York, I think about 1967 or 66. So I met Upendra in Seattle and started coming to the temple. They were chanting Hare Krishna like I was. And Upendra had encouraged me to write to Srila Prabhupada. He said, you have to establish a relationship with your guru and that you should write him. And he said also, he's very, very, if you give him a donation for his book fund, it's very dear to him. So I was working at a television station in Seattle and visiting the temple. So I started writing little short letters to Srila Prabhupada, sending $50, $100, like that. And then finally, Rath Yatra Festival arrived in summer of 1969, so I traveled down and saw Srila Prabhupada for the first time giving a lecture at the storefront there in the Haight-Ashbury district, just before Rath Yatra. Then the Rath Yatra Festival itself, there was a one-chariot festival, and Prabhupada gloriously sat there in the Rath cart, and we could see him. It was a very long festival, and ended up in the Family Dog Auditorium. So I'd seen Srila Prabhupada, and I had a little more time, so I drove Rabani-Nandan and a few devotees here down to Los Angeles. And getting here in Los Angeles, the very second day they said, since you're new, you can get to go on a walk. At that time, most everybody had lots of associations, so the new bhaktas, like myself, Bhakta Karl, who had a shaved head I'd had a shaved head for about 7 days. I could barely tie my dhoti without it falling off, and I was now going to go on a walk with Srila Prabhupada. I was now about to meet him face to face, and I was petrified, literally horrified, petrified. You know, in all my lurking and studying and trying to find out spiritual life, I'd read a lot of encounters, the Zen master encounters. That's what I was kind of projecting into my mind what was about to happen. I was going to get grilled on the Bhagavad Gita. I was going to be asked questions, and I was going to make a fool of myself. So they took me over to Prabhupada's house where he was staying. It was close by to the La Cienega Temple, and they brought me in and sat me down, and I was waiting for Srila Prabhupada, and mortified. And then he came in, and he sat down, and his servant said, oh, this is Bhakta Karl. He's the devotee from Seattle who's been giving you the donations to your book fund. And Prabhupada looked at me and he smiled and he thanked me. And it completely, I was so put at ease. I was so, I felt, oh, I am truly in front of a real spiritual master who's so humble. He has no false ego. He's so full of love with Krishna that he's thanking a mere mortal person like me for giving a few dollars to his book fund. And I knew at that very moment that I was truly in the presence of a pure devotee. because he just dispelled whatever fear and projected ideas that I had. I immediately felt I was in the presence of a truly pure devotee.
I remember when I first came into Krishna consciousness, actually my first contact with Hare Krishna was that song in Hair. Remember that in end of 1960s, they had that musical. It was called Hair. And at the end, the last scene was they would dance around in less than fully clothed, and they would chant Hare Krishna. And I had the album, and I used to listen to that album every day. Later on, in 1985, I met a young man in New York, and he said that he was present in the room when Prabhupada was preaching to some young man who was writing a play, and Prabhupada told him to include the Hare Krishna mantra. So that musical, that last song was put there because Srila Prabhupada requested.
This one lady says, if there's a God, why are people starving? Sometimes if the patient is sick, the doctor will prescribe that he does not eat. Finished. That was the answer. That was it, you see. That's called eloquence. That he laid it out and just... Now here's another one that's very, very interesting. This boy in the back at 26 2nd Avenue says to Prabhupada in the question and answer period, he says, somebody told me that people who chant Hare Krishna are crazy. Prabhupada says, not somebody, who somebody? And the boy says, my doctor. And Prabhupada says, oh, a medical man? As if to say garbage man, like with that tone. What does a medical man know about spiritual science? But if he wants to understand, let him read our essay, Who is Crazy? You see? And then he ended that class with, and now distribute prasadam. There were gulab jamuns there. He said, we are not dry philosophers. See, so perfect. I mean, that's perfect drama.
So I had requested him in the letter that personally I don't think I can ever follow all these rules. Although at the time I was following, but I was being very sincere, and therefore I have to ask one request, that there are 3 types I have read. There's the Nitya Bada, and there's the Siddha, what is that? The Vidhi, Bhakti, the one who follows achieves perfection. There's Nitya Bada and Nitya Siddha, and then there's Kripa Siddha. So I mentioned that I cannot ever follow all these rules, so how I will ever become, so I request you make me a Kripa Siddha. And then he said, all right, Guru-kripa, we'll give you. So he can do as he likes. He is independent.
During the Nectar of Devotion series in Vrndavana in 1972, when Prabhupada gave the Nectar of Devotion series for 1 month, there was one doubt that was plaguing me because we were putting so much effort into book distribution. But I'd always been taught when I was first joining that the parampara is like a link, a chain. And if you don't have the perfect link, if you're not initiated, you really can't go back to Godhead. And so I had this doubt that we're distributing so many books, but these people will read them, but if they're not initiated, they can't go back to Godhead. So I followed Prabhupada from back Rupa Goswami's Samadhi back into the courtyard, and just before Prabhupada took the steps up onto his courtyard, I presented this question to Prabhupada. I said, we're distributing so many books, but if people aren't initiated, then they can't go back to Godhead. And Prabhupada turned and looked at me right in the eyes, and he said, just by reading my books, they're initiated. And I thought that... another example of compassion, because I thought that was just an incredible example of compassion.
So in Vrndavana, I remember the first time I ever saw in person Srila Prabhupada, he was speaking at the Vrndavana temple in the courtyard. So you have, Rupa Goswami Samadhi on one side, Sanatana Goswami on the other side. I mean, practically, as Prabhupada described it, the center of the universe. Okay. So, seeing Srila Prabhupada there, it struck me how listening to Srila Prabhupada's lectures and reading Prabhupada's books was exactly the same thing. So there isn't any difference. So the actual being in Prabhupada's presence, all you have to do is open the book. It's just as good as Srila Prabhupada sitting there. There is absolutely no difference.
When I received my Gayatri initiation from Prabhupada, it was probably about 1972. And New York was a big temple at that time. A lot of devotees there. And we had established the press over in a part of Brooklyn that was a little bit dangerous on what was it? Tiffany Place. And a little bit dangerous over there. A couple of devotees got beaten up over there. And so we had to have guards at night, people who would stay loft watch. And so it was my turn to be on loft watch. And just my luck, so right after Prabhupada arrived, I was stuck on loft watch over at Tiffany Place. Everybody was over at the temple with Prabhupada. So I was there and wasn't able to come over till about 8 o'clock, and it was time for me to receive my Gayatri mantra right after breakfast in the morning. So I went in, and I guess I had been neglecting my fingernails for a while. And they were long, and because I'm also involved in construction and stuff, they weren't so clean underneath. And when Prabhupada was about to give me my Gayatri mantra, he looked at my hands and he said, "Your fingernails should be short and clean like mine." And I looked at my fingernails, and since then I've kept my fingernails short and clean. It was very...
In Calcutta, 1972, we were on a morning walk, and Srila Prabhupada was walking, and there were a lot of brahmacharis, and some of the brahmacharis were complaining about the fact that at the temple at 3 Albert Road in Calcutta at that time, we were all living in that building. And they were saying, Srila Prabhupada, the women, sometimes we pass them, they don't put their saris over their head, and why can't they get a place outside, separate from the brahmacharis? And, it's not really conducive for our brahmachari life. And these comments, these questions were going on. Prabhupada did not answer. He was silent the entire walk. And he'd stop sometimes, and the cane would stop and he'd stop, but he'd keep walking. He never responded to the requests. And then we came up these stairs of 3 Albert Road, and the door was closed, and someone opened the door, and there was Jamuna and Palika and Shamsundar's wife, Malati and Kaushalya and Madri and the others who had stayed behind to wash the floor, to cook for the deities, to bathe the deities, to dress the deities, to prepare Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasan, and prepare the cushions for the guests that would come. And the women immediately just hit the floor and said, "Jai Srila Prabhupada," and paid their obeisances. And Prabhupada turned around to all of us and said, "Yes, but if you associate with these women, you'll go back to Godhead." So when I told Kirti last night that story, he brought my attention to this page in My Glorious Master by Burijan Prabhu. And so I'll just read it. It's page 250. It's called Women, Widows, and Success. Shrutakirti then rubbed mustard oil onto Prabhupada's back. I moved to face Prabhupada's front and was enjoying the sweet atmosphere that surrounded him. With his eyes closed, Prabhupada spoke. "My godbrothers criticize me that I have allowed women to live in our temples. This is not done in India. Only brahmacharis can live, but I have become successful because I have made this adjustment." Prabhupada opened his eyes and continued, "Although they criticize me, their Gaudiya Mas are empty. The only time they have people coming is during Gaur Purnima to Mayapur for parikram, And who is coming to Parikram? Widows, women in white. Because I have made this adjustment, I was successful. Shrutikirti then moved to massage Srila Prabhupada's side, asked, Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle? Prabhupada's eyes closed and Shrutikirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Srila Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, that takes a little intelligence.
He never talked to me. He only asked me questions I could not answer. Things like, why does the grass grow in the cracks on the sidewalk? Or walking on along the beach in Madras, some brass statue across the street, a man on a horse. Who is that man on the horse? How would I know? But everything made me feel like a fool. And that is the purpose of Guru. Murkya. One should be a murkya in front of the Guru. He should always be a fool. As soon as he thinks, now I become friendly with the Guru, now I know a little bit more, then you're finished. People sometimes they think that they've caught up with Srila Prabhupada. They're finished. Eternally you will never catch up. Now I will go some other place and then I will get some higher instruction. No. He will instruct you according to your surrender, according to what you are ready. But if you think for 1 second Guru doesn't know something, then you are finished. So Srila Prabhupada ingrained that in me very strongly. He never was never asking me or associating with me like that, only making me feel like a fool. And I was sit in the room when they did those dialectic spiritualism. I was always in the room, and everyone would come. In the afternoon, I would sneak in the room, just listen, every day. You know, I would sit there and I would hear, watch the champion of the world spar with people and defeat them all and present Krishna. It was a great entertainment, and it was life. It was the life. But then I began to think how I will get into the inner circle, how I can get in the inner circle with His divine grace. And then I understood I must go do something to get His attention. I cannot just... I was going daily for preaching and we were working, but I had to do something more. Because it wasn't that Srila Prabhupada just decided to make friends with somebody he liked the way they looked or they dressed or the way they put their tilak on. No, it was their service attitude. So then we went. I went out to South India and opened to Bangalore, and Yashodananda was with me, and we did many things. Then he began to write. Then we learned Sanskrit, we learned mantras. Nobody knew mantras then. We only had blue Bhagavad Gita without Sanskrit, but we had learned many of the slokas. So in this way, as one has to get one has to become, has the Guru to attract his attention.
Prabhupada always dealt with everyone according to Deshapartakala. He always dealt. He was a perfect artist in preaching. He always dealt with each one individually. Different people might ask the same question and he answered it in a completely different way. So now I didn't hear this man ask the question. This was at Harvard, May 6th, 69, the night before he married me in Janava and Bardraj and so on and so on. The man asked, what does Krishna mean? Now, I didn't hear it, but here's how Prabhupada responded. This is a Harvard scholar. Prabhupada says, Krishna is a proper noun. You do not know that a proper noun cannot be translated? My name is Bhaktivedanta Swami. Can you give a translation for that? Now, he answered his questions in waves, I call it. Here's the third wave. But if you want to understand, we have so many books, you can read them.
I'm just going to tell a short story that we had in Caracas, Venezuela. In 1975, Srila Prabhupada came to Caracas from Mexico. And we were distributing a lot of books those years in the buses.
And myself and another devotee, we were selected to wash Prabhupada's feet when he arrived. Here comes Srila Prabhupada, and of course our hearts were in joy. I remember I jumped so high I almost touched the ceiling. And Srila Prabhupada came, sat down, and they told me, Havi, you can go. Shruti was there, Nitai was there. And the only problem was that I was not trained to do this. So I have a problem here. I was right in front of Srila Prabhupada, and there was honey, milk, water, yogurt. What am I supposed to do here? So I concluded that it should go from thick to thin. Now, I've seen in our next generation of gurus how they wash, the disciples, how they wash feet. They just pour a little, like that, very simple, no? I didn't do that. I poured some honey on the right foot. Of course, first of all, while they were chanting Sri Guru Charana Padama, I was very nervous. In fact, I'm very nervous now. Because I was initiated here in 1973, so I'm very indebted to New Dwarka and Dwarkadish. So he had his socks, and I had to take his socks. And of course, I wasn't going to say, Prabhupada, I just waited for him to spread his legs, and he did. So I took his socks off, and I started to touch his feet, which was extremely warm. And I understand that the principle behind washing Prabhupada's feet was that an old sage is coming from one town to another, walking distance, and you wash with nice elements his feet to, how you say that? To refresh. Yes. So here I go, and I start with the honey, and then I put the yogurt, and then I put the milk, and I start to take his feet, and I start to massage his feet. And I go with my fingers up and down in between his toes. And I can hear behind me devotees going, Havi, what are you doing? There were Nitai, he kicked my behind. He actually was telling me that I was doing something wrong. And, we were at that age and that mentality that whatever, somebody who is 2 months older than you, it must be true. So I stopped, and I very slowly lift my head towards Prabhupada. And when I looked at him, he went, it was a don't listen to them, just go on. And I went on with enthusiasm. Now, the second foot came, right? And according to the plan, Tamoha was supposed to wash it. So I called him. So Prabhupada said, no, you. I remember I committed some childish behavior because I lifted Prabhupada's feet I was showing off like I'm doing now. And he had to put his hands in the back like that. I still remember that. And now, while that was coming on, I washed his 2 feet. Then, of course, I have a big bowl with all these elements: yogurt, honey, milk, ghee. It was such a wonder. It's a lot. So what was I going to do with this? I then let me just spread it, and I started to spread it. While they were chanting, "Taiga Hariva," and I went, go. I mean, after I spread 10 times, everybody was wet already. So, what am I supposed to do with the rest? I'm not going to throw this away. So you guess what I did. I drank it.
He instructed to me that I should collect his money because I had shown that I had a capacity to do that and an ability, and that was a big mistake on my part, I think. I did not know that. I thought I would collect something and I could go on my way, but Srila Prabhupada saw that I could do that, and no, there was no, that was, then he told me, you go, because they will not give me money. The other devotees will not give. The leaders, he had the projects, and he used to tell us, if I had 18 good men, I could take over the world. But people weren't surrendered. They did not fully surrender to whatever he would say. Once he said there was 2 types of devotees: those that come to me and ask me, I want to serve Krishna this way. So Srila Prabhupada, yes, you do like that. And then the second one, the first class one, that one's second class. First class is, I am a fool, I don't know anything, tell me. And Guru knows. They doubted that he knew. No, they doubt what Prabhupada knew. He knew how to do everything. He is super soul. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tata Guru. This is our teaching. Yasya Devi, one who has this unflinching faith in God and in Guru. In God we trust, but more we trust in Guru. This is our position. And if you come to that position, then he reveals Krishna to you. Only you must be sincere and make effort. So Srila Prabhupada, he's ordered me, you do. So I argued with him daily in Vrndavana. Nicely, I objected. Srila Prabhupada, they won't help. The temple presidents don't want me to come in America. They come around their temples, they shun us. The brahmacharis all want to go with us because we're fired up, and it's natural to travel and see the world instead of sit in one place. And the temple presidents don't want the sannyasis coming, and we're living in the van. Like this time I told him when we collected a lot of money. Srila Prabhupada said, yes, that was such good, you should go do it again. I said, Srila Prabhupada, we are collecting this money 18 hours a day we're working. Srila Prabhupada, 18 hours a day. Our process is 24 hours. So there's no question of getting around it. But this is in that, finally he told me, anasrita karma phalam karyam karotiya, sannyasi, 6th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, verse 1. A sannyas is he who works as he's obligated, and he's not attached to the result. So actually Vaishnava sannyasi is different, because a Vaishnava generally takes sannyas out of bhava, or love for Krishna. There's nothing to renounce. We already know it is all illusion, it is all the Lord's play. So what we are renouncing? We are only renouncing our illusion. So what is sannyas? But out of ecstasy it is taken for service. But if you're not mature like we were not, but out of to expand this movement, Srila Prabhupada gave many people this position, even if it lasted 6 months or a year, to help other conditioned souls, to do something for some time. That is our good and their good. So he gave instruction like this, to get this money because these temples should be there. And that was the order. And they are still there, therefore it is a divine, and the collection was successful. It was not done with ego or trying to get on the chart sheet of Rameshwar. It was there for the satisfaction of His divine grace. We did not have our names read in the temple every morning. It was hard, 7 days a week. All the devotees that assisted in that are eternally benefited. But this is our bhakti yoga process. That Guru is everything. As you get more into this science of bhakti, which Srila Prabhupada came to give, he did not come here to make a personality cult. He came to teach the science of how to see God, not that he will see and we will not see. You know how he used to say? People used to say, "Are you seeing Krishna?" So the Prabhupada said, "So if I am, what good is it doing you? Are you seeing? And I'm eating and you are not eating, what good it is doing you watching me eating?" So we have to eat, and he came to give us. And if we do not get it, we are the big loser. We are faithless. If our faith increases to such an extent, we will see Krishna immediately. So that is what he has given us. And as we go with this world is such a big place. But gradually it comes to the devotee that there's only, your vision is this. Only the lotus feet of the Guru is left. Prabhupada's feet is left. Nothing there. So in this age you have three things that are of any value. The holy name of the Lord, service of the Vaishnav, and the remnants of the Vaishnava's food. These things are all golden. So Srila Prabhupada has taught us this science, how to get it, how to be spiritually intelligent, to get Krishna. And that is what he is teaching, and that is what he showed us personally. Many people see many different things, but we see he's given that science for us.
About 1974, 75, I made a record called Gopinath. Engaged a few devotees. We went to a recording studio and we made a recording of Gopinath. And Prabhupada came to LA and Karandar was here, and he wanted to play the record for Srila Prabhupada, and he invited me up to the room to play the record for Srila Prabhupada. And I was quite excited. And so we went up to the room, and Prabhupada listened to the record. Do you remember Agni Dev sang it? Maybe some of you recall it. But it was Agni Dev and all devotee musicians. And Prabhupada was listening to the record, and when he was all done, he was, "Yes, that was very nice." And I don't recall whether he brought it up or whether Karandar brought it up, but it was something to the effect of, what are we going to do with this? What do you plan to do with this record? And I think it was Karandar kind of trying to maybe see if Prabhupada would agree with it, but the idea was we were going to maybe try to use it on Sankirtan, the record. Maybe we would distribute the record and instead of incense or something like that. And Prabhupada, he thought for a minute. I remember he kind of closed his eyes and bobbed his head. And then he responded, and he said, "Well, that would be okay as long as it doesn't decrease my book distribution." And he pinched his finger like this. As long as it doesn't decrease my book distribution by this much. And now, I was sort of sitting off to the side, so I got it right away. But Karandar kind of went, what Prabhupada? What did you say? So he emphasized it again, twice. As long as it doesn't decrease my book distribution by even this much. So, yes, sure, yes, yes, Srila Prabhupada was the answer. And when we left the room, it was kind of an unspoken thing between Karandar and I. We never ever, we never dared bring up that subject again. But it was interesting because Prabhupada could see into the future, because later we did have so much trouble with records destroying the purity of the Sankirtan. And because of our lack of purity.
There was kind of a stupid newsman at the airport who interviewed Prabhupada. And he wore glasses, kind of skinny, and it was definitely a certain character type. And he said, "Swamiji, in your travels from one place to another..." Whoops. Can I just hold it like this? in your travels from one place to another, what difficulties do you encounter? Prabhupada looks up at him and says, I have no difficulties. You have difficulties. The guy goes, oh, yeah, you're right. So they're walking. Prabhupada's walking through the airport. I remember, I was looking down on this scene. They're moving, Prabhupada's moving out of the airport, and they're on the escalator. And I'm looking down on the scene. So the newsman's now asking Prabhupada, well, if your movement is so important, how come you have so few followers? Prabhupada says, we have 4 rules. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling. The man says, oh, I see. So,
The Archbishop of the Anglican Church had come to see Prabhupada, and I was fortunate enough to be in that room. And Prabhupada literally opened up the whatever it is and allowed Vaikuntha to flow into that room. And the whole room was transformed into Vaikuntha. And he literally melted this Archbishop. And the next day there was a paper, you remember Madhavisa? We have nothing to fear from the Hare Krishnas. That was in the headlines.
Jonas Dombergs, he was very intellectual. He was going for his PhD at McGill University. But he said, he told me, from the time that he was 13, he was looking for a man who could tell him about God. So one time, he was up in Dr. Mishra's ashram, upstate New York. And he was asking Dr. Mishra so many questions about God. And Dr. Mishra said, don't worry, just meditate. Now, I don't know if Prabhupada was there then at that particular meeting, but he was there on the grounds. I don't know if he was at that meeting. Very likely that he was, and that he heard Janardhan, although I can't say for sure, asking Dr. Mishra, what about this about God? What about that about? Okay, so then the next day at breakfast, there's a big breakfast hall, and they're all sitting there, you know, all these uptown yoga, ashram visitors and so on. And they're sitting there eating, so Jonas Dombergs, he's sitting at one of the tables, and Prabhupada, out of the clear blue sky, Prabhupada walks up to him and says, would you like to go for a walk? And Janardhan said as he was taken aback, but he said, yes. And remember, this is the man who, boy, he was looking for somebody from the age of 13 to tell him about God, okay? Now, they're walking out on this big, you know, upstate New York ashram, big campus. And Prabhupada said, this grass is so nice. Only Krishna could make a carpet like this. So then they're going on further. And Prabhupada said, there's a pond. And Prabhupada says, you see that pond over there? Janardhan says, yes. And he says, there are millions and millions of living entities in that pond that we cannot perceive. But Krishna knows every one of them. So now this is the third thing that I remember from this little beginning. You see, this is their first meeting. Janardhan looks at the tilak on Prabhupada's forehead and he says, that mark on your forehead, what does it stand for? And Prabhupada says, it stands for victory. You know, and that's the beginning of Janardhan's relationship with Prabhupada.
Once I gave him $108,000. I came to Vrndavana, and the way I gave the money is I deposited in an account and showed him the receipt. So I showed him the receipt, and they were building Krishna-Balarama, and he was walking the construction site. So I'd given the money, and then I'd gone, taken a bath, and I immediately came back, and he was wandering the construction site, so I went up to him, and immediately he yelled at me, take that dhoti off. It was the wrong color. Never let me see you again. Yeah, immediately chastising me. Many, many occasions he would chastise me about this or that. And sometimes the hardest thing in management, and those that know, who have this Prabhupada association knew, that you would have to take the hit for other people. Sometimes there would be some few peas on the floor in the prasadam room, and he's walking the temple, and he would see that, and then you would get, why is that there? And what can I do? You know, once Srila Prabhupada told us, he ordered us in Hawaii 24-hour kirtan. So I organized it, and we didn't have much of a crew. There wasn't that many devotees, and some of them couldn't hit a key if they, you know, if it was, you know, a Sunday, but they, we did it. We started it. So that evening, his room is just above the temple room. This devotee was singing, and it was like the cats out in the alley. It was terrible. So Srila Prabhupada, he said, who is that? I said, it's 24-hour kirtan. What 24-hour kirtan? I said, Srila Prabhupada, you ordered 24-hour kirtan. He said, I didn't order any 24-hour kirtan. So we stopped it. Yeah, he played that he didn't know anything about it. So he would have to take that. You know, you can many. That's just the process of training. And especially if you get angry, you did in a big position, you would get big credit. And if you made a blunder, you made a big mistake. Once I took we were having so much trouble with police, and I took DDs out of Japan. Srila Prabhupada said that he would not, he would close Mayapur before he closed Japan. And he practically didn't talk to me for 3 months. You know, it was like that really disturbed. I went and rectified the whole thing, but yes, he took many chastisements. That was his mercy. You know, and he would chastise you for no reason. One time he came and they sent the servant, 12:30 in the night, to where I was sleeping in Hawaii. And they woke me and said, Srila Prabhupada wants to talk with you. So I went in there, sat down, 12:30, and he excused the servant. We were sitting alone. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And personally, I thought I was doing good. I was sleeping 5 hours a day, getting up, serving, organizing, doing my job. So Prabhupada said, what are you doing? I said, I'm taking rest. Why? Because I'm tired. Why are you tired? I said, I am sitting here translating books. I've only had 1.5 hours. That is enough. Why you cannot sit with me and translate? I said, so, you're a Paramahamsa. I'm a beginner. Why you're not a Paramahamsa? Then I became very frustrated, and then I began to get angry, you know. Personally, why am I getting this? What did I do? Usually you need a reason to get yelled at. And so then I said, but, and then I just said, I'm just a nonsense. He said, why are you a nonsense? And I was trapped. My face turned flush and blue practically, and then I saw that I was angry, and then I also saw what I will do. Now I've become angry at Prabhupada, what I can do. He's a person, you're a person. People thought it was so easy to be around His Divine Grace. I laugh, I scoff. Many people, they think, oh, Prabhupada, you get 5 feet from him, you know? And then he got me in the corner. He had me like that, and then nothing to do. I just start to cry. That's all. Just start to cry. I sat there. I was defeated. And then he hugged me, told me one story, and sent me to bed like a kid. Told me a story of Krishna, like from the Krishna book. I said, now go take rest. You know, so this is his way to break you, to set the pattern for the future. You know, and according to, if you could take it, what is your relationship? I can tell you many stories. Even one time I stood up we had to give some money to one devotee to go to Taiwan. And I didn't like that devotee because he would not cooperate. So I refused. No, Prabhupada, I won't give him any money. And Srila Prabhupada said, I will give him. And I said, Prabhupada, you're wasting your money on this man. And we began discussing. And finally I got so angry, I stood up. And I said, I quit. I quit. I quit. Srila Prabhupada said, I will also quit. Now sit down. So then after everything cooled down, everybody laughed. I said, well, I'm sorry I got all excited. And he said, that is good. You're enthusiastic. This is, you know. So it was not like it is all a bowl of cherries. You know, and to be around His Divine Grace was not easy. It was easy, but not easy. because you're dealing with an acharya, and he had to set standard. Although he was very grateful for what service you did, but you could not use that. In the beginning, he used to thank me and say how nice I was doing in the collections, but later on, I put the money, 100,000, 200, he never even said a word. Just put it aside. Not a thank you or anything. People want, you hear the women or something, if you're married or something, oh, you never say you love me, you never say, oh, to go there. Would you ever give me $200,000 a day or a month? I will say something nice, but this is service. And we took it as service. There was no expectation of, we were waiting for the mercy. Because bhakti is shraddha. This nishta must come. Without nishta, you cannot move. And it must be as solid as the rock of Gibraltar, as the Himalayan mountain. It must be there. And Krishna is testing. You will have one fly-by-night sannyasi come by with a little potency, and it doesn't even have a speck next to his divine grace, and his teaching is not exactly the same, and someone, I will get it cheap over there. They don't want to pay the price. They don't understand the price. They don't have this rasa with his divine grace. It was maybe never there in a deep way. But those that have experienced that, even though they also, we have to get the teachings and act. But some people there, it is not easy thing. Not easy thing. To understand Guru Tattva is very difficult subject matter. It is practically, when you understand Guru Tattva, Krishna is guaranteed. And then you will move. But people can be switched. Kanishtas can be switched from this guru to that. They can be switched in their faith. It is not solid. So Srila Prabhupada he has given all the thing, and 1,000 times over if you hear his tape, he's saying the same thing, because we need to hear it. I mentioned today to someone, nowhere you will see any guru in the world getting Guru Puja daily. It is only once a year they take it on their appearance day. And nowhere you see samsara in Mangalartik, and then Srila Prabhupada is Sri Guru Charana Padma an hour later. So much worship of the Guru is stressed. Why is that? Because he has said that we Westerners are very headstrong. We have to first catch how important the Guru's mercy is. And by satisfying the Guru, Yasha Prasada, Bhagavat Prasada, then we can satisfy Krishna. So that is why he is given like this. Then we can think of other things.
One time, the first time I was coming before Prabhupada, I was thinking, because Brahmananda built me up, he was the temple president, 26. So I was thinking, wow, I'm a great devotee, So here I am bringing prasadam to Prabhupada, and I was thinking, he's going to say something like to me, like what Bhaktisiddhanta said to Prabhupada, that you should preach in the, you know what I mean? So I thought he was going to say something like that to me, so here I am bringing prasadam. It's the first time. And Prabhupada took the prasadam, but he did not even recognize my existence. He could do that. He could, again, he withdrew his, you're thinking that you're a big devotee or something? This is how I deal with you, and if you were actually humble, he would, he might pat you on the head. He was very pleased, and always reciprocated.
I left the temple in New York before the rest of the press. At that time we were working on Chaitanya Charitamrita. And there was Prabhupada, because his books were so dear to him, the artist had a special opportunity to have time with him. Whenever he would come to New York, the artist would come to see him, and he would comment on the paintings we were working on, and we would ask him questions about the paintings. But when I came to Los Angeles, there was no one else that was working on the books. I was the only person. Vasudev was working on these paintings here, and he and Charahasa had the opportunity of talking to Prabhupada about that, but I was the only person who was doing paintings for Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I started a painting of Advaita Acharya when he was praying for the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. And in New York, I had to go through Jadharani because she was the oldest artist, and she would ask the questions, and I was always in the background, and I was afraid to speak up, but in LA there was nobody but me, so I had to talk to him personally. So I came up to his quarters and with my sketch, and I'd drawn the sketch of Advaitacharya performing his arti as he was praying, but he was praying to a deity of Krishna. And Prabhupada said, no, this is wrong. He said, Advaitacharya was praying to Shalagram Shila. And so he got a piece of paper and a pen, and he started doing the drawing for me. And so he drew this little asana, and he drew the Shalagram Shila. And as he was drawing, he was describing everything, and the eyes and the dots over his eyes. And he said, and he's drawing this up, and I said, that's the umbrella? And he said, no, the canopy. Or I have one or the other, I forget. But I just felt so wonderful that he could actually be there with me personally instructing me. And I took that as such a great gift to be able to have that personal instruction, and to immediately I took that sketch back and went to work on my own drawing and then put that right back into the painting. It was a very wonderful experience for me.
Prabhupada's walking through Central Park, morning walk, and he walks past this statue, a sculpture from here up, the sculpture. You see them in Central Park, and in the promenades, whatever. And underneath the sculpture it says Webster. So Prabhupada looks at it as they're going by and says, oh, the dictionary man? And they say, no, Prabhupada, Daniel Webster. And Prabhupada says, Daniel has come. And Daniel has come, basically, is a line from a play by Shakespeare called The Merchant of Venice. So he begins to tell the whole story of The Merchant of Venice because he studied it in college. And, of course, I don't have to go through all that, but anyway, he told the whole story. And then he said, and the purport of this story is, because the merchant wanted the pound of flesh, etc., and he couldn't get it, he was frustrated. And the purport of this story is that in this material world, you can never get what you want. He gave that purport. See, no materialist person can ever get what they want in this material world, no matter what, You acquire so many things, but you can never get, why? Because it's only in spiritual life can you get what you want.
When I was in India, I always loved kirtan, and from the very beginning, and I was leading a kirtan in front of the deities. It was in Calcutta, and I didn't really have Srila Prabhupada, in the beginning, he referred to me. He knew, my wife at that time was Kaushalya, and he knew Kaushalya very well because he had met her in Hawaii sometime before, and he told her and others that she reminded him of his niece. She had a darker complexion. And so when first Prabhupada got to kind of know me on a physical way, he said, that husband of Kaushalya, bring him here. So that happened one day after the kirtan. I don't know if it was Shruti Kirti or one of Prabhupada's servants came and said, Prabhupada wants to see you. And I go. So I went in and Srila Prabhupada said, that was a very nice kirtan. And I said, oh, thank you. And he said, but it is not Gadadhara, it is Gadadhar. So sometimes I cringe when I hear it. Even today I hear it so many times. Devotees are saying Gadadhara, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda, and I remember Prabhupada saying that to me. And if you look at the Sanskrit, I think it's Gadadhar. And but I was obviously moved by Srila Prabhupada's generous compliment.
Oh, another time at an airport, one time Prabhupada said, he was sitting around, all the devotees are watching him, he's sitting waiting to take a plane somewhere. So he says, can you get my arm in this? You got my arm in this shot? Okay, so he says, the scientists, they are very proud. He went like that with his arm, And all the devotees, we kind of laughed at it. It was not laughed at him, but we were entertained by it immediately. And I've seen this several times, he withdrew his senses like the tortoise within the shell. You see, he immediately, because I am your spiritual master, I'm not here to entertain you. But you see, because we took it the wrong way, so not blatantly, but just subtly, almost unconsciously. It's an amazing thing.
One time I had the fortune in Vrndavana to go into Radha Damodar, in Prabhupada's rooms there. And Shruti Kirti, of course, was there, and Shruti Kirti was so kind to a lot of the smaller devotees. He would allow us to come in to see Prabhupada, And I'm eternally grateful to Shruti Kirti for that. But anyway, I got to go in to see Prabhupada, and I had this one question, because I think Narayana had told me that the moon was self-illuminating. Silly question, but I went in before and I asked Prabhupada, I said, some devotee had told me that the moon is self-illuminated. And Prabhupada put his hand like this. He closed his eyes for about 2 minutes. And then he opened his eyes, he said, I don't find that. And it was such I don't know, either he went to the moon
We took a group of devotees and we went to Vishakhapatnam. And Srila Prabhupada stayed at the Krishna Chaitanya Mission, which was the temple of Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj. So we stayed there 7 days. And Anand Prabhu was working in that mission. Puri Maharaj gave Anand Prabhu to Srila Prabhupada. You've heard the stories of Anand Prabhu. He is Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's disciple. He's a brahmachari. He could do the work of 10 men. He would cook 10 preps for 200 people with 1 or 2 assistants. Later, he came in Vrndavana. All the devotees from Vrndavana know him. He worked when the Krishna-Balarama temple was being built. So we stayed there, and he cooked the feast, 2 feasts a day. And Srila Prabhupada used to walk up and down as we were eating and say, eat more, and he would be so satisfied. Chaturvida Sri Bhagavat Prasada, Svadana Triptan, satisfaction. He was so satisfied to see us taking this. And as a neophyte as I was, I was overeating and I had to eat. So I would eat, and come lunchtime, I had no hunger, 0, but I would eat again. And at nighttime, no, it was still in my stomach, and again, because it was so good. And after the 3rd day, then I threw up everything, finally, and went to sleep for about 8 hours in the afternoon. But Srila Prabhupada used to take this, and that was a good incident. Many more. In Govardhan Hill, we went to Govardhan once, and on the Parikrama, the only time he went there. So we were in the Govardhan, and we had brought a big basket of puris and some sabji for taking lunch. So we sat on the veranda, and many dogs came around, and the devotees were eating. So someone threw a rock at the dog. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, this is Govardhan, everyone eats. And Srila Prabhupada took the puris from his plate and threw them to the dogs. He said, feed the dogs now. All the dogs must eat and they will be satisfied. Always mini prasadam. Prasadam is, everyone got prasadam. No one went away without some prasadam. Anybody visit, give him some prasadam, give him some prasadam. Srila Prabhupada, would come in his room. Sometime he would be, especially, this was when I would be out. I would come back, I'd been out serving, and I came back to Vrndavana or something. I'd come in his room, and then sometime he would feed me with his hand. Here, he would take this rasgula and take this, and I would sit and eat, and he would share his meal with me. This happened a few times. He would share his meal with me, and like that, how is everything, and we would eat together. With his hand, he would give me. So, this is how one can leave Guru. They don't know. Maybe some people think they will get someplace else. One should be humble. Trinade pishuni shena. Humility will bring you the mercies of the Lord. Otherwise, you have not come to this position yet to understand. And then you will be worthy of getting some mercy.
Also, I was thinking that when we were working on Chaitanya Charitamrita, I did a painting of Krishna, and he was carrying Nanda Maharaj's shoes on his head. And that was one of the paintings that I had in progress when Prabhupada came, and he was looking at the paintings up in the art department. And he looked at the painting, and I had put a little thread around Krishna's waist. He said, "What is that thread?" And I said, "Oh, that's something that Jasodamai would put around Krishna's waist to protect him." And he said, "Where did you hear that? Where did you read that?" And I said, "Oh, it's in, I think it's in Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada." He said, "No." And then I remembered that Rukmini, Bhardraj's wife, had told me that that's what they do in India to protect children. They put that little string around their waist to protect them. And that's where I picked it up. And he says, "You must be very sure that everything you put in your paintings are taken from my book." He says, "Don't put anything that is not described there." So I learned a lesson there. And
another very good question and answer. Harvard also, but this is a different group. The International Students Association on Harvard campus, same time, 69, May 69. An Indian man says, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that all paths lead to me. So won't we naturally come to Krishna? No matter what we do, right? All paths lead to me. So Prabhupada said, all paths lead to me. He's quoted the Sanskrit, and then he said, that is very good. But why, if we will come to Krishna naturally, why is Krishna instructing Arjuna? Not that we will necessarily come to Krishna naturally. Therefore, Krishna's instructing, this is how to come to me. This is of course, this is the quickest way. But then he said, actually, so that was the first wave, this is the second. Actually, if we did act naturally, we would come to Krishna. But when we come to this human form of life, we begin to take so many unnatural things. If we did act naturally, we would come to Krishna, but we begin to act unnaturally, the human intelligence, in the human form of life. And so many people go, that doesn't have to be explained. LSD, alcohol, this, that. There are so many ways to fall back down into the lower species.
I would write Srila Prabhupada sometimes and complain. These Japanese are not taking it. It is very difficult here. It was a great austerity, no Sunday feast. For everybody's out on the road. We used to go chant in the street 4 hours a day, 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. And the only people who would ever question us was a tourist looking for directions or some half-cracked Japanese trying to practice his English. Nobody came with any question. So Srila Prabhupada, he informed us that we should continue because there was such benefit. They were giving some money, they were doing some service. Just like in Hong Kong. I was in Hong Kong and I had to close the center because no one came. Then later Srila Prabhupada asked me what happened. I told him, he said, no, you go back and open one office and go and sit and chant on your beads sometimes. So what do we know the effect of the holy name, the pure name? Just as Chernobyl was leaking out this toxic fumes and it spread all over Europe. That is a gross matter substance. This is the most divine, subtle substance. It will go everywhere and very far distance, and the effect will be there on the consciousness. So this is why we have to hear correctly from Srila Prabhupada and accept that, because that is he can understand the potency of the name. We have not experienced that, just slightly, but not in full.
Prabhupada's lecturing in Montreal, a big place, an 8-lane bowling alley. And he was going on very calmly for about, I don't know, 20 minutes, maybe even a half an hour. And at the time, this is 1968 again, this is the summer of 68. So at the time, there were a lot of new yogis coming into America and giving different teachings. So there was one that was teaching, and Prabhupada was talking about it, but very calmly. And there was one who was teaching that you can meditate, and by meditating after 6 months you will become God. So when he started roaring this time, I was looking around like I was on the defensive, like, who's he yelling at? I started looking around, who's he? That he's actually spiritual master of the universe, so he's roaring at the universe. Anyway, at a certain point he says, "What is this nonsense that you can meditate and become God? God is God! He is God when he is sitting in the lap of his mother. He is God when he is speaking on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He is God when he is playing with the cowherd boys in Vrndavana. He is God. He is substantially God." This is another thing, that basic thing that an actor has to do that's consistent with not pretending, but with playing the part, is that he's got to make the point. And there Prabhupada made his point most absolutely. He absolutely made every point.
We went to Bombay, traveled to Ahmedabad. We had another large program in Ahmedabad. Went to many life members' houses. And the wonderful thing that I found that Srila Prabhupada did was that he would, when he preached, when he was in the position of preaching, I mean, he was fire and brimstone. When he would sit on the Vyasasan at night, we'd have this huge pandal program. I mean, I swear, I don't remember exactly, but in my mind, I'm thinking that the size of the pandal tent was as big as a city block. Was I right? Easily 5,000 people, easily. Every single night, this place would fill up. Now, the Indians are very intelligent, and also many of them are very well versed in the Shastras. So when Prabhupada would preach and he would say things, they could relate. They could understand that he is saying the right thing, even though he was chastising them. And many times Prabhupada would speak not in English, but in the local language, either in Hindi or in Bengali. And you could tell, of course, you could hear the verses that he would cite. He was extremely stern with them. But when you would go to a life member's house, he was the most wonderful guest. He would talk with them, and make small talk, and he was concerned about every single person. It was totally amazing. That Srila Prabhupada had such, like a jewel, had so many different facets from this angle, and from that angle, from this other angle. Just like if we try to take a blind man and touch an elephant, there's so many different, if you touch here, it looks like, it's this big around, and you touch here, it's this big around. It's got, so many different aspects. Srila Prabhupada was absolutely perfect judge of time and circumstance. He always had exactly the right thing to say at the right time for the right person. And sometimes when we read the letter books and other anecdotes about Srila Prabhupada, if you read his letters, perhaps he's saying to one person, yes, very good idea, you should get married. Then another situation, he writes him, no, it's better not to get married. So, I don't want to take too long, but I understand. So what I'm trying to say is that Srila Prabhupada had perfect understanding of time and circumstance, how to engage each person and make that person enlivened in Krishna consciousness. On one hand, he had scholars like Pradumna. On the other hand, he had, ex-bikers. I won't mention any names, but everywhere in between, everywhere in between, he could engage people and make them work together. And the fact is that all of Prabhupada's senses were in complete control. He was never out of control.
So at this time, the temple needed some money, so the brahmacharis were sent out to do work at jobs, and so I was working actually at the McGill Library. You know, that's where Bhaktivinoda sent. So I was working, getting pay, and helping to support the temple. So one day I was coming back from work. I had no idea what was going on. These devotees had just arrived. I didn't know who they were. Of course, a lot of times, all during that summer of '68, there were people coming in, so it was no surprise. And there were 2 or 3 initiation ceremonies during the week, fire sacrifices during the week, as well as Monday, Wednesday, and Friday classes by Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was there for all of them, plus the Sunday program. He's practically there 7 days a week. So I remember I'm walking up the stairs to the Montreal Temple, which is on the 3rd floor of this building, and I heard, "All glories to Swamiji," a woman's voice, "All glories to..." And it struck me, I thought, boy, Jadharani's got a stronger voice. Because I had no idea, it wasn't Jadharani, it was Janaki. And I walk in, I see these 7 new devotees, you know, just looking really like halfway between hippies and devotees, and they were really far out in their own way. Shyam Sundar, Malati, you know, Mukunda, Janaki, Guru Dasa, and Jamuna, and Saradia was the 7th. She didn't go with them, but she came with them. So there was a kirtan going on, and I was just coming back from work, so I'm coming into this ecstatic kirtan with Prabhupada and all these devotees who had just arrived, and nobody even told me anything that they were coming or who they were or what they were going to do. So the kirtan ended, ecstatic kirtan, and then Prabhupada said, all the devotees were sitting around in a circle, and Prabhupada wasn't on the Vyasasana, he was sitting where he sits for performing sacrifices, on the floor actually. And so he said, "This is all by the grace of my beloved spiritual master." And then a big tear came out of his eyes, and the whole room just became swelled with, we were like one in this mood, absolutely caught up in his mood, And he said, in 1959, when I was a householder, my spiritual master came to me in a dream, and he said, "Now you take sannyas, now you go and preach." And so but I was thinking that I am a householder, how can I give up my family? And then he says to us, so this was Maya. Here he is criticizing him, and we're saying, oh no, bro. And then he gets very specifically, he says, of course Prabhupada was always, like what my acting teacher even calls, super specific, always. He says, so I am very pleased to see these devotees coming, who have come here, and it's on there's a tape of this, who have come here from San Francisco, and they have stopped here, and they are going to open a center in London. And it was practically like he knew what was going to happen. It was like he was already celebrating what they were going to do. We had no idea, They were going to go maybe meet the Beatles and something, whatever. They were going to try to preach in different ways. But he saw it all. So he said, I am very pleased. My Guru Maharaj sent so many sannyasis to London. They could do nothing. Now here I am sending these householders. And it was almost as if he was saying, and they are going to be a great success. And of course, we accepted it. And that's exactly what did happen.
Srila Prabhupada was your friend. Some people say there is a word friendly, there is the word guru. So the guru is friendly with us. And he is also our friend, but he is also not our friend in the sense that we are equals. That will never be, but he is our best friend because he is our well-wisher. And he is friendly with us at times. He is stern with us at times. But the thing that I saw in different cases is I saw, I don't know if you would count these in the 26 qualities, but things that impressed me right from the beginning was his way he took time to make you satisfied. He always would go out of his way. I would ask him to chant some mantra in the tape, he would do. And I saw when George Harrison came to see him in Vrndavana, Srila Prabhupada did not flatter him at all. He was not enamored. He told him, yes, you're very famous, but what is your guarantee in the next life? You must accept a spiritual master and learn the science. And afterwards I told him, Srila Prabhupada, I've increased my faith so much today, I've seen the way you've dealt with this people. Because we grew up admiring the Beatles, and here this famous, world-famous person has come in the room, and Srila Prabhupada did not cater to him or try to get something from him. And of all the things, because it is a quick question and I have no time, if you ask me tomorrow, maybe I can think about this. But off the top is Srila Prabhupada, his devotion and friendship with his disciples. He never backstabbed people. He never, if he said something in confidence to us, you know, like one time he was speaking about one devotee, something about the management. And that devotee was informed by one of the persons in the room. And Srila Prabhupada became very disturbed. He said, that was for your ears, not for his ears. This is for our understanding. But he would never, he was always, if something happened, he immediately would protect you, and especially me. Everybody was criticizing me, and he always defended me, all the time. He would say, oh, the cow is giving good milk, it has to take the kicks, this or that. So many things. People would write letters and to him criticizing the way I did something, but he always defended. That is the friend like that. And as I go through life, I find it very difficult to find another person that will stick with you like that.
This man says to Prabhupada, he's sitting up front, he said, I can't understand why all these young people are bowing down to you. Yeah, it's karma, he's just coming in. So Prabhupada's answer is, just as you are thinking they shouldn't bow down, they are thinking that you should bow down. He said, this is a democracy, is it not? So the majority is bowing down. See, the majority, you know, Prabhupada was always perfect like that. And
I used to take the service. I used to use my position when I would get around Srila Prabhupada, that when he would wake up from his afternoon nap, he always would have a coconut. Because usually I was in a tropical place. I was in Hawaii, or I was in Fiji, and I used to not let the servant bring it. That was my time. And I used to take that in. And he would wake up, and when he would be sitting there, and he would ring the bell. Now we would bring the drink, whether it was some juice or something he would take. He would be intoxicated from this samadhi he had been in. But resting was samadhi. And every single time he would start in about the conditioned souls. He would quote Prahlad or something. Like one day he asked me, so who is coming this afternoon? I said, one man was supposed to come at 4 o'clock, but it's 4:15. Ah, who will come? You know, AC, DC, they are all, he saw some signs that morning. But always he was feeling this, how his mind was constantly absorbed, how I will help these conditioned souls. That is his total compassion on the conditioned souls. He felt great stress at seeing them in stress. So that was why he is his divine grace. That was his mood. There was nothing there. nothing there. He ever tried to take some personal service or credit.
Shivananda brings an Indian man who's from the West Indies, but he's Indian because the British brought Indians to the West Indies. And he's a Christian. And so, you know, Shivananda brings him in. The man says, you know, Prabhupada's very polite to him, always supremely polite. You know, perfect gentleman Prabhupada always was. And the man says, I'm a Christian. Now I expected, you know, you're an Vedic, you were born for, and you're, you know, doing this religion, and they're all meteors and this and that. But no, Prabhupada said, that is all right. We don't say you change your religion. We say that whatever religion helps to awaken your dormant love of God, that is. Say so. Here, always, again, Desha Partakala, and he was always a perfect gentleman. Of course, sometimes he did rip, you know, he did rip the ether with his voice, like a lion, the lion and the rose. You know, sometimes like a lion, sometimes soft as a rose. Definitely, he had everything. He was actually, in another sense, I've thought this, that he's the greatest person who has ever set foot on this incontinent continent of North America, South America, you know, the greatest person ever to set foot here. So, that's something to contemplate.
Premamritam banidhi Dhira dhira jana priyau Priyakarau Nirmasaram pujitau